Hi, everybody. It's Austin at Homeowners Financial, and I wanted to talk about credit. This is a credit class I've done for borrowers in the past, and I'm really breaking it up into a couple different things. So I'm going to share my screen, get you some details. There's a lot of nuances, but I really want to start with the history and just what credit is today. So let's first start with the basics of credit. Let's start with nuances, and let's talk about how it's really been with COVID-19. So let's first start with the basics. Now, look, no matter what, a good financial plan is a roadmap that shows us exactly how the choices we make affect our future. This is really what credit is, right? We got to put it together so that we can use it in the future, right? It's not a crutch, it's a tool to achieve our goals. So let's talk about the basics of credit. Like, how did this actually track? So originally, credit was manual. Like back in the 20s or even before, it was very, very regional, right? You would go to your bank, you pay your bills, they'd lend you some money. Nice. But what if you went across the country? There was no history. There was no scoring model. It was literally like, Bobby came in. He looked really nice today. He made his payment except for $5. Oh no, $5, right? There was a lot of bias, like, oh, Bobby didn't look so good today. We're worried about lending him more money, right? So there's a lot of different things that weren't standardized, and there wasn't necessarily a way to share this information. Now, in 1956, Bill Fair and Earl Isaac, FICO, started the Fair Isaac Corporation. That's where we get FICO. They were the first ones to really do this. And fun fact, it was really for businesses. It was for trucking primarily. So the truckers are like, hey, I'm in California. I got to drive to Texas. I'd really like to buy some gas. Can you guys pay for it? Can we get credit for it? Right? It wasn't necessarily a consumer concept. It was a business concept. And this is where we got the FICO score, which is what people refer to as their credit score today. Back in 1970, there then became the Fair Credit Reporting Act. Now, this is a streamlined reporting. This is legally a credit act, right? This is at the federal level, and we still abide by this today. So what can be reported for how long, right? You can't report that Bobby didn't look good that day. You can report whether he paid the payment or not. And it's going more towards the consumer-friendly side of things. It's less biased. It's really more rounded. 1974 had the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. This is a direct response to the civil rights movement. It became unlawful for any creditor to discriminate against an applicant based on race, color, religion. Did you know that women used to have to get permission from their husbands or their immediate male relative to open a credit card? True story. That actually only ended in the 70s. In the 70s, y'all. That's not that long ago. And then in 2003, we had the Fair and Accurate Credit Transactions Act. Now, this is what gave you, the consumer, a right to your data. Previously, you had to pay for it, apply for a loan. We didn't have to give you like, no, your credit doesn't look good. And you're like, can I have a copy? We're like, no. Well, in 2003, it's like, hey, that's super dumb. Why are we not being transparent, right? So that's when that changed. So let's talk about scoring, because scoring is what people really focus on. And really, when we look at it from a mortgage perspective, it's way more than scoring. But scoring is what people say, I have an 800, I have a 700. This is not a grading class. But what goes into scoring? So think of it like high school. You want a lot of people saying nice things about you, right? You want to be that popular kid, like, ugh, they pay me on time. I've known them forever. They're super rad. You don't want to be like, ugh, they never pay me. I never hear from them. You don't want to be the creeper in the corner that nobody knows. It's about data. It's about positive data. And there's actually 8 algorithms per credit bureau. Some people say, why is my credit score different, Austin? I looked on Credit Karma, like, cool, that's version 3. We use version 5 of TransUnion or Equifax, right? So if there's 3 bureaus, and there's 8 algorithms per bureau, there's 21 possible scores that are out there. And not every creditor reports to every single bureau. That is not a requirement. TransUnion could have an agreement with, say, American Express, but American Express maybe doesn't have an agreement with Equifax or reports on TransUnion. We see this primarily on collection accounts, right? You got a parking ticket. Fun fact, I got a parking ticket when I was 18 years old. And then 5 years later, the county of Multnomah, because I was in Portland, Oregon at the time, said, oh, you owe us $6. We're sending you to collections. I'm like, there's no way I'm not paying a parking ticket, like a $6 balance. What are you talking about? Right? And so I had a score that was 30 points lower on one bureau than not. I only found out about it when we were working to buy our first house. Right? So I called them up, like, what's the deal? And they're like, it actually turned out being wrong. They gave me a letter. But they weren't reporting it to every bureau because they just have one agreement. So it's all about data. But let's talk about what makes up the score. 35% is payment history. How well do you pay? Do you pay on time? 30% is capacity, and this is where you have the most ability. Besides the obvious of please pay your bills on time. And fun fact, it's actually not the creditor's responsibility to notify you that you have a bill. You're supposed to check in. But capacity is where you have the most like nuances to play with things, right? Capacity is your balance to limit ratio. So for example, if you have a $10,000 credit card limit, ideally you're spending no more than 25 to 50% ever. Oh, but Austin, I pay my credit cards off each month. Don't care. It's not what the bureaus are looking at. They're looking at that data based on when it's reporting. Not that you pay it off. Yes, it's positive. That's helping the payment history, but the capacity is that balance to limit ratio. Oh, but Austin, I spend $5,000 every month and I have $5,000 on the credit because I travel for business. Cool. Call and see if they can increase your limit. Simple trick. 15% is length of credit. So that's where they say don't shut down your super old credit card. So I got my first credit card when I was 18. I got it with UC Santa Cruz. They had a promotion. My husband didn't do it. I added him to my card so he could pick up my credit history. He could have that length of credit. 10% is new credit, and these are your inquiries. We're like, oh, I don't want to run my credit because it's an inquiry. I'm like, well, first of all, we got to see what the other things factors because that's way more. The inquiries should not be super impactful to your credit unless you're making a lot of late payments, unless you're really maxing out your credit cards or deferring those student loans because that's adding to the principal balance. And then 10% is the mix of credit. This used to be weighted higher, but they realized, gosh, we're giving better credit scores to people that have mortgages, but you can't get a mortgage without a good credit score. So let's talk about how these are weighted, right? Let's talk about how this is going to go through. 40% is current to past 12 months. So if you have late payment, which is 35% of that scoring model, and it's been in a year, it's super heavily weighted. If it's farther away in the distance, it's not. That's why I tell people if you have that $6 collection from the county of Multnomah and it's been 5 years, don't pay it. You're bringing that negative data forward, right? Now, I'm not saying please don't pay your bills and don't pay what you owe, but let's be careful and let's be strategic about what we're doing. 30% is the past 2 years. 20% is the past 3 years, and 10% is beyond. So again, if we had a late payment in the past 2 years, it's going to be weighted here versus weighting it back there. Good thing. So some key things to remember about this is it's all about data, positive data consistently. Information is pulled from various things. So if your name is spelled wrong or if you have a super common name, my maiden name was Smith, right? So A. Smith, there's a lot of A. Smiths out there. There may be data that be showing up on your report that's not correct because maybe your name is spelled wrong. Maybe your social security number was input incorrectly. Maybe it's a different address. And the last thing is to remember that every 20 points counts. 760 is the highest threshold for scoring in mortgages. So if you're 780, 760, 761, 800, cool, you're all at that top level. But they go in 20-point ranges. So if you're at a 721, you're still in that 721 to 740 bucket. So what have we learned today? We learned that credit is about data. We want positive data. We learned that it's a history of our data, not just the score, because there's so many different modules for score. Thank you so much for taking the time. I'm Austin at Homeowners Financial. I am very grateful to be on this journey with you. And if there's anything I can do to help, let me know. Cheers.